You're listening to Alamo City Limits podcast with Noah Magaro-George, the official San Antonio Spurs podcast of Pounding the Rock in SB Nation.
What's going on, San Antonio Spurs fans? Welcome back to Alamo City Limits, the official San Antonio Spurs podcast of SB Nation and Pounding the Rock. As always, I'm your host, Noah Magaro-George, and that's my co-host, Damien Bartonek. Man, how are you doing today on this fantastic Friday?
I'm feeling pretty good knowing that I'm officially on spring break. It's my last spring break as a college student. I graduate in December, so I mean, it's a little bittersweet, right? Because, your life's going to change here within the year and stuff like that, but overall, man, I'm feeling good, ready to talk about the Spurs. I'm ready to talk about some topics that, normally we kind of keep it really, on the court, but we have a topic here that's going to start off that's off the court. Obviously deals with stuff on the court, but it's kind of more off the court and just thinking out loud and stuff like that, so I'm really excited, brother.
For sure, I'm excited too, and just so our listeners know, we're recording this pod on Friday, March 11th at about noon Central Time here, so we've got a handful of interesting topics to tackle today, so let's just dive right into them, starting with the most pressing matter at hand, which of course, Dame, you know this. Head coach Gregg Popovich, one win away from the all-time regular season victories record, all-time, ever. Nobody's ever going to have more than him. One away. So, one, how important is this record to his legacy as a coach? Does it change his standing among the all-time great play callers in NBA history? And when will the Spurs pick this win up? Is it in their future? Is it coming soon? Is it coming later? When is it coming? So you can tackle those in whatever order you want to, but we're gonna hit all of those eventually.
I think he's gonna get it against the Pacers tomorrow, or when you're listening to this, it'll be Saturday. Saturday's game against the Pacers is when I would think. I think in terms of what it means for his legacy. For me personally, kind of growing up and seeing, me and you, I'm 23, you're 25, right, 26. We've seen a lot of great coaches, right? I mean, you've seen a lot of fantastic coaches even today, right? You see the Eric Spoelstras of the world, just a lot of really good coaches, right? And it seems like Pop is just that next level, man, where it doesn't matter where he's at, where the team's at, on the floor, where the organization's at, what direction they're heading. The Spurs are going to be putting out their best possible product, and there is no wasted movement. There is no wasted, game. There's nothing wasted with Coach Pop, and for me personally, I think he is probably the greatest coach in NBA history. When you just look at the totality of his work from, 5 titles in 3 different decades, he has the most playoff wins all time. Not only that, too, man, I mean, the ability to get the absolute most out of every single player that you have on your roster, more times than not. And not only that, too, structuring your team around these skill sets where, it could be really difficult and go against your basketball philosophy, kind of, right? We've seen over the years where, especially with DeMar DeRozan, they're taking, a ton of mid-range shots, and he's really just killing it from inside the three-point line, but the NBA's trending in a completely different direction. So to a fault, you're kind of playing to, your certain player's strengths, but I think that's kind of the beauty in his, ability to coach and be a leader, is just to really make everyone feel a part of this team and feel like they're going to have a role in this, even if they're not even playing at all. So for me, Noah, I think this win is kind of just the cherry on top of what is, in my opinion, the greatest coaching resume in the history of basketball.
Yeah, I think that's a fair thing to say. I mean, he's up there with guys like Phil Jackson, Red Auerbach, Pat Riley, Larry Brown, Don Nelson, Rudy Tomjanovich, Lenny Wilkins. I mean, you name it. He is one of the GOATs. You could argue he is the GOAT, the greatest ever. And I understand, people will say, Phil Jackson, he had Kobe and Shaq, and he also had Michael Jordan, and that Pat Riley had an abundance of superstars with the Showtime Lakers. And pretty much every great head coach ever has their guy or their guys. Pop had Timmy, he had Kawhi, he had Tony and Manu, he had David Robinson for a hot minute. And so, yes, I understand people will make the argument that, Pop is washed. He's not winning anymore. He's not going to the playoffs. But when you don't have a generational talent on your team, that's kind of how it goes. So I don't think there's any argument against Pop being one of the best coaches ever. We've heard about everything that he does on the court. But we often, I think, if you're not in San Antonio or you're not a Spurs fan, you don't realize how much he does off the court. He's really important to the community. He makes a lot of donations. He does a lot of community service. He's a big advocate for social inequalities, or I guess he's an advocate for social equality. And he just does so much on and off the court. He cares for these players. There's only a handful of guys who you hear talk badly about him, And it's usually those guys who kind of haven't gotten over themselves, whether it's like a Steven Jackson or a Robert Horry. It's guys who are like, well, if you had done more, or what if you had given me more opportunity, or if you had put me in this role. But, Pop does, like you mentioned, he has put people in the most ideal roles possible, and he's gotten results from that. And I think it's hard to say, this guy is not one of the best ever. I mean, it's clear. Like, even if he doesn't end up winning against the Pacers, which I do think they will, I think that's also when they're going to get the record. He already has more wins in the playoffs and regular season all time than anybody. So I kind of agree with you. It's sort of like the cherry on top, but I don't know that it adds a lot to his legacy because I think he's already cemented it. Like, he could go 0-82 next season as the head coach, and I would still say, Pop's one of the GOATs ever, like hands down. So yeah. I don't know that it does a lot for his legacy or his standing among the all-time great head coaches and play callers in NBA history, but just the stuff that he's been able to do is impressive. And I think the one thing that stands out to me among everything, 22 straight playoff appearances. Now, Tim Duncan, Kawhi, Tony Manu, they have a lot to do with that. But no one else has done that except for one team. And they didn't have one coach the whole time. The Sixers did that, early into the league's history. And the fact that the Spurs were able to tie that record in an era where, guys are leaving left and right, I think it speaks volumes to what Pop has been able to do. And no, they're not in the playoffs right now. They're probably not going to make it this season, but I don't think that takes away from his legacy at all.
Yeah, I think for me too, kind of echoing a specific point you made about Steven Jackson. Even a Steven Jackson, who I listen to their podcast a good bit. I've listened to some old episodes. There's still a really, really deep respect there for him. And that's one thing I think with any player, with when you have coaches and when you're coaching great players, not to say Steven Jackson is an all-time great, but just when you're coaching good to great players, you need to be that firm kind of leader of men, like we hear all the time, right? Whether it's whatever position or whatever coach, you have to be a leader, right? And no matter the situation, no matter the circumstance, it seems like Pop always gets that respect from anyone. And he doesn't do it in a way, Noah, that like, I know growing up with sports for me, leadership and how like kind of I was raised just in general, it was very like firm, very strict. Like, if you don't do this, I'm going to do this, right? That was kind of the environment like I kind of grew up in. Pop doesn't seem like that guy, right? Like, yeah, well, you'll see him get mad, and upset with his players and, oh, you're messing up, blah, blah, blah. But there's a lot that goes into leadership than just being aggressive. And I don't know if you read it earlier today. It was a really weird, like, segment thing that DeMar DeRozan said that Pop made them watch like a National Geographic story about penguins and tied it into basically everyone needs to be, together and be on a roll, blah, blah, blah. And like little things like that, Noah, I think speak volumes to the man and the leader that Coach Popovich is. And really, that's what embodies who the Spurs are, is just that overall just ability to lead and take charge, make change, be consistent. And it's crazy, right? Making change, being consistent doesn't always go together, but that's exactly what the Spurs have been. And yeah, man, I think it's been super dope to see the Spurs over the years, man. I'm probably rambling a little bit. It's fun talking about all-time great coaches, man. So I'll kick it to you to close it out.
Of course, and I just think it's like kind of interesting if you think about the record, because he's going to get the record. There's no way they lose like every game for the rest of the season and he doesn't get the record. That's not going to happen. But once he gets this record, it makes me wonder, will anyone ever be able to catch that? Right, because like I think the logical candidates are guys like maybe Steve Kerr, perhaps Doc Rivers. Doc Rivers is not that much younger than Pop, so like he's probably not going to catch Pop. Like that's probably not going to happen. And even Steve Kerr, who's had a lot of success with Steph Curry, with Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, those guys are kind of I'm not saying they're like on their way out of the league. They're not like super old, but they're not as young as they used to be. They're in their 30s now, and like he's miles away from getting that. So it's just one of those records that, we talk about, Wilt scoring 100. Nobody will ever do that. No one will ever break that record. To me, this is one of the unbreakable sports records because I just don't see it happening because everything had to align perfectly, right? You had to get Timmy, and then alongside with Timmy, you already had David Robinson. And then once David Robinson was sort of, fading out of the league, riding into the sunset, you had Tony, you had Manu, and then you landed Kawhi Leonard along the way. And so for me, I don't yes, he was excellent coach. The circumstances were great too. And I don't see those two things lining up for anyone anytime soon to make a run as historic as Pop has had since he became head coach in 1996. I just don't see it being broken.
Yeah, and that's another great point. I kicked it to you to see if I was going to close it out, but you're making great points that I just got to counter as well, man. Like, I think another crazy record, too, that we talk about, because there's so many, right? Like, whenever Russell Westbrook first got the triple-double, you were like, no one's ever going to do that. And then he did it, right? This is legitimately a record that I don't think anyone, I mean, thinking off the top of my head, like maybe Brad Stevens, because Brad Stevens is like a younger coach, right?
But he's not even a coach anymore.
Yeah.
He's the general manager. So like Ime Udoka, I just don't see it happening.
You know what I'm saying? Like if he was to come back or like something like that, maybe because he's young or something. But like, what are you gonna do, right? Like
Eric Spoelstra, maybe, but he would have to have like a really incredible run. And like, I love Bam, and I love Tyler Hero, but like also Jimmy Butler's their best player, and he's I think he's 33, 34.
Yeah, and think about all the good coaches that like have had good players and they haven't been able to win. Like Rick Carlisle was a fantastic coach and couldn't figure anything out in Dallas with a player that everyone's assuming is the next Larry Bird, right? Like, think of all the really, really good coaches that have, been through the NBA or that are there right now. And yeah, man, it just speaks to his greatness. And I think overall, you just can't take this. You can't take this away from him. Like, I think this is kind of it. Like, there's no way I think someone can tell me like Coach Pop isn't the greatest coach ever. Like, I think I'm firmly in that position, man, to be honest.
No, I think I'm right there with you, and there's probably a little bit of bias from us because, we cover the Spurs. We also grew up San Antonio Spurs fans, but I think you look at the resume, I just don't think that there's a good argument against him. I know you could probably make an argument for guys like Red Auerbach. You probably make an argument for a guy like Phil Jackson, maybe even Pat Riley if you really want to go there, but at that point, you're splitting hairs. They're all so close. Yeah. You could say, so-and-so's the GOAT or so-and-so's the GOAT, but they all have a case. I just feel like Pops is the strongest. Now, it's going to be kind of tough to transition. I don't know how you really transition from talking about an all-time great, a future Hall of Famer, but I think we kind of need to discuss the question mark here about Zach Collins. And maybe it's an exaggeration to say he's an all-time question mark for the organization, but he is a question mark right now. So I'm just looking at what he's been able to do. I mean, we talked a little bit about him on the last pod, but he's sort of been an enigma for the Spurs since he came back. We saw him have a really strong debut against the Houston Rockets, but since then he's sort of been, like, if we're going to be honest, meh. So how would you handle Zach Collins for the remainder of the season? What exactly are you looking for from him, as a former lottery pick who's now, a backup center for the Spurs? And should Pop in the front office even really feel committed to him long-term behind Jakob? Because I think there's a chance that they could upgrade elsewhere. So I want to get your opinions on those three things for sure.
Yeah, so first, he's only going to be making $7.3 million next year with only half of it guaranteed. So technically, like, they don't need to be committed to him in any sense. I mean, you're going to eat, $3.5 million if you get rid of him after this year. So, I mean, you don't have to be committed to him in any sense. I think one thing that me and you both mentioned, whenever he was coming back and whether it was his time in Austin, coming to San Antonio, is you wanted to kind of really see him carve out a role for himself, get up to speed. You weren't expecting him to be an all-star, but you were expecting him to kind of solidify himself as that backup five. And when you look at the numbers, man, especially like to start his return right to the NBA, they're not pretty. I mean, committing 47 fouls and turnovers to just 32 steals, blocks, and assists, like combined, that's tough. I mean, not only that too, just as a role man, he ranks in the 58th percentile at a frequency percentage of 26.7%, 1.15 points per possession. I mean, you don't really know. Like, like I said on the last episode, I don't even know what he's like, quote unquote, good at right now. Like, what can you do on a consistent basis? Like, yeah, you can say, oh, he looks like he's switchable, or and he can stretch the floor and stuff like that. But like, we haven't seen that this year, right? I mean, he shoots 32% from three for his career, and this year he's shooting 33.3%. Like, that's below league average. Like, that's not someone that you can say, oh yeah, he stretches the floor. Oh yeah, that's a floor spacing five. Like, no, man. Like, you really have no idea. So I think right now I would continue to play him. I wouldn't just get rid of his minutes. I definitely let him kind of ride this out, and hopefully he can get up to speed and build, some sort of momentum, some sort of consistency that can kind of potentially leapfrog him in, to the offseason and hopefully into next year. But, I mean, in all honesty, they shouldn't be committed to him in any sense, and I don't think that they will be. You know what I mean? Like, I agree with you 100% that they probably should upgrade, to be honest, if it's available.
Yeah, I mean, I think they should look to upgrade. That's not to say that they shouldn't keep him around next year and give him an opportunity to win a spot in training camp or throughout the season or whatever. But again, I want to go back to the turnovers and the fouls. Like, you talked about 47 fouls to 32, steals, blocks, and assists, or the 47 fouls in turnovers. I just want to put that in perspective. That means as of right now, like as we're recording this podcast, that means a little over a fourth or a quarter of his offensive possessions that the Spurs have had when he is on the floor have ended in a turnover. And a fifth of his possessions have ended in a foul. That's not good. That's really, really bad. You don't want that sort of ratio of fouls to possessions or turnovers to possessions. And I think we've seen interesting flashes of him be able to, he's in the post, he sees a cutter, he hits a cutter, he can get an open shooter if he gets an offensive rebound. Like, he puts the work in. It's not a matter of, is the effort there? But I keep going back to this as well. He's a switchable defender. He can stretch the floor. I mean, that's just really never been the case. I know, okay, for his career, we're talking about him shooting, poorly from three, about 32.5% from his career, 33.3% this season. But you go season by season by season, I think people are really hanging on to the season in which he shot 37% from three, and he really didn't take that many threes that season. He had 24 attempts in a season in which he missed most of the year because he had a shoulder injury that required surgery, and he missed like 70 of the games. Like, I just don't know why we're saying, not just, me and you, but like fans, media, why we're advertising this guy as a guy who can shoot the three. And I understand the switchability thing. Yeah, before all the foot surgeries, before the shoulder injuries, he looked relatively switchable. He looked good. But one thing that just, it sticks out like a sore thumb, Dame. I don't know how to put this nicely, but he's been really bad. When he's switched on to point guards, shooting guards, small forwards, he's allowing them to shoot 61.2% against him. That's not a guy who screams switchable. That number, just to me, it screams, I'm a turnstile. Like, you get a switch, we're going to hunt you.
Chicken.
We're going to hunt you. And so, yes, it is a small sample size. Things can improve. But as it stands right now, the lateral mobility does not look good. He hasn't been much of a rim protector, not really much of an event creator either. I've been watching the film. I'm writing an article about Zach right now. Most of his steals, you could argue, he deflected the ball, and it sent the ball in the air, but someone else corralled the ball. Like, yes, he created an event there, but he's not really like stealing the ball and forcing a transition. Like, in all of his offensive possessions right now, the Spurs have only been in transition once with Zach on the floor. So I'm hesitating to see where these things that have been advertised are going to translate. Maybe they will, but I'm a little concerned. Like, if I'm the Spurs, I'm a little bit concerned about where Zach is right now.
Yeah, and that's another thing, too, is just what are they going to do? Like, for a team that already lacks versatility, like switchability, like you were mentioning, especially like defensively, it doesn't help that, the guy that you quote-unquote brought in that's supposed to be switchable, like, just isn't showing that. And like you mentioned, allowing a 61.2% field goal percentage against basically the guys that you're quote-unquote supposed to be able to switch and defend. I mean, I don't know where they go from here with him. Like, I obviously said, like, keep playing him, blah, 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 but I wouldn't be looking at Zach Collins heading into this offseason as, like, yeah, we're solidified at the backup five, like, the Spurs are good to go. Like, absolutely not. I don't think anyone really at the 3, the 4, and the 5, especially off the bench, but even the starting, 3 and 4, I don't think there is very many people that are quote-unquote safe. Like, the Spurs need to upgrade, especially at those 3 positions, more so the backup 5 than the starting 5. But I just think in general, Noah, for a team that already lacks versatility, switchability on the defensive end, a guy like Zach Collins just hasn't made that, hasn't given an answer to that problem. So I think it's a really, really tough situation right now.
And do you want to play just like a little bit of trivia? I know we do this like pretty much every week, but
yeah,
I got to get one. I got to get one in every single week.
Let's do it.
Okay, so I'll give you a number. And this is just since Zach Collins came into the league, so 2017, the average NBA center, which is what he's classified as this season, has shot at least, on average, the average NBA center has shot 71% at the rim. If you had to take a guess, at Zach Collins' finishing numbers at the rim, do you think he has finished above average or at average at the rim in any of his seasons? Like, just based on what you've seen this year.
Average to below average, I would imagine.
Do you think he's hit average in any of his 5 seasons? I get,
Probably
the injured
not.
season doesn't count, but any of the 4 seasons this year.
Not.
No,
Probably
he hasn't. His rookie season, 50 of 88 from at the rim, 56.9%, well below league average and well below center league average. He comes back 2018, 2019. It improves a little bit, 62.6%. Then the next year, 60.6% drops down a little bit. He gets injured. And this year with the Spurs, granted, very limited sample size, so I will give him the benefit of the doubt a little bit. 52.2% at the rim this year. So for his career, he shoots 59.1% at the rim. That's right around where Lonnie Walker, who up until the last month had been finishing for his career. That's not good. So if he's not going to be able to knock down threes and stretch the floor, if he's not going to be able to finish in the paint as a roll man, if he's not really much of a mid-range shooter because he also shoots 29% from mid-range, on 107 attempts for his career, and he's not going to be switchable, and he's not going to defend the rim, and he's going to commit a lot of turnovers, and he's going to foul a lot, historically throughout his career has done these things. What does he bring to the table? I'm not saying to give up on Zach Collins by any means. I'm right with you when you said, ride it out. Let's see what he can do for the rest of the season. Maybe he improves, but he's not DeJounte Murray. DeJounte Murray tore his ACL, took a few years to get back, and now he's an all-star. But that's not the trajectory for everybody, right? Not everybody suffers a significant injury, comes back, and then they're an all-star. I just don't, and I don't expect him to be an all-star. I want to make that clear. I don't think he's going to be an all-star. I don't think anybody said that. But can he even be a serviceable role player? Because right now, he's been hurting the Spurs more than he's been helping them.
Yeah, 100%. And I think this is actually a really good transition into another player that the Spurs are going to have a lot to consider with this summer. And in general, where the Spurs are at right now, man. I hate to, continue the negative train, but, veteran sharpshooter, Doug McDermott, he provides a lot of spacing for the Spurs that they need, right? Especially for shooting the ball. They've had a lot of trouble over the last couple of years. As the volume increases, the numbers have kind of been a little bit the same. And really, no, I got to ask, man. Do you think the Spurs, will eventually move Doug to the second unit? Do you think that they're actually using him properly to maximize his skill set, or do you think they should be open to trading, Doug McDermott this offseason?
And maybe I know when I wrote the script for this podcast, so that we have topics to talk about and we know what we're talking about. That was one of the things I was iffy about writing is should we talk about Doug being moved this offseason because it's so early? But for me, the answer has to at least be think about it. They have to, at the very least, think about it. I mean, again, as you mentioned, Doug is a sharpshooter. He's a vet. He understands the game. He's the son of a really well-respected coach. His father, Mr. McBuckets, if you will, he coaches at Creighton. He played for, his dad there. So he's a coach's son. He understands how the game works, but he has athletic limitations. He has offensive and defensive limitations. And look, if he's not knocking down three-pointers, and he hasn't been recently, I just don't know how much value he has. Now, yes, he's not going to shoot 27% from three like he has over the last 8 or 9 games for the rest of his time here. But you can't, I just don't see you being able to play him next to Keldon Johnson and that working as your 3-4. Keldon is a decent defender who he leaves a lot to be desired. Doug has been one of the worst. I'll let you get into the numbers, but Doug has been one of the worst defenders in the NBA, bar none, this season. And it hurts me to say that. I like Doug, but that's just the honest truth. He has been awful.
Yeah, so right now he's allowing 51.6% field goal percentage as a defender, which, that's 9th worst in the NBA among players that have contested at least 300 shots. No, I don't remember what DeMar DeRozan's numbers were. If you remember them off the top of your head, I would love to hear them, but I know one thing that a lot of people talked about last year was how bad DeMar was on the defensive end, and I know Doug hasn't looked much better, at least this season. Another thing, too, that I find interesting is, so Doug, right now, he's shooting 42.2% from three. That's good for 7th in the NBA. The catch-and-shoot numbers look good. He's a 41.7% catch-and-shoot three-point shooter. The spot-up numbers look really, really good as well. He places in the 71st percentile. But, ever since the Spurs came back from the All-Star break, he's shooting only 27.6% from the floor. And I understand, obviously, that's not going to be what he's going to shoot for the remainder of the year. I get that. But when you have specialists like McDermott, right, who are very one-dimensional, Obviously as an offensive talent, he can do a lot off the ball, right? So that's not what I mean by one-dimensional. I mean, he's obviously a plus offensively. Defensively, he's a minus. But whenever he's a minus on offense, you're going to be in trouble. You're going to be in a lot of trouble.
It's like Bryn Forbes. It's like a big Bryn Forbes. Like,
exactly.
If he's not knocking down shots, then he's hurting you because he's not bringing anything else on the other side of the court.
100%. And that's why, like, a bench move would be, like, understandable. I think it actually would kind of help the Spurs a little bit there, especially if they can get someone at the 3 or the 4, next year. But he makes a lot of money, man. And I don't know how much. I don't know what bench players, like, immediately that you sign to start or will be fine with coming off the bench and making, $13.75 million, over the next 2 seasons, or for the next 2 seasons, rather. So I don't know if it's even likely that they would do something like that. I think it's smart. I definitely think it's the route they should take because I think Doug off the bench would be sensational. Really give the Spurs a little bit of spark, a little bit of just off-ball spacing, just kind of stuff that they really need. But I just don't think it's likely, Noah. Like, when you signed Doug, everyone thought, like, okay, he's going to start immediately for you, 3-4, like, you're good to go. But with a team that's this limited offensively and defensively, to be honest, because they've been a roller coaster on that end of the floor all year, it seems as if, like, if you're going to have someone like Doug McDermott, they got to be on. And if they're not on, you kind of got to pull the plug quick and just ride it out with whomever else can at least offer something for you defensively.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it is a little harsh, but it's true. I mean, there really is no way around that. If he's not knocking down shots, then he's not really providing much on the court. And I think another thing that's important to mention when we talk about his salary, because you say, he makes $13.75 million for the next 2 years. It's fully guaranteed. So it's not like they can just cut him or, it's partially guaranteed. And so they can eat that money. They can't. That's a lot of money. And so if you're under the impression that he needs to come off the bench, fine. If you want to try to make that work, fine. But if you're trying to trade him, what is his value? Because I know a lot of people said, the Spurs overpaid, and the Spurs typically have to overpay to get someone to come to San Antonio. And he's a guy who talked about, I really wanted to play for Coach Pop. I respect Coach Pop. He's an icon. Like, I want to be here. So if he wants to be here, great. If you want to try to make it work, great. But I think one of the important things to make it work with Doug is find a way to make him an effective cutter again. Like, we've watched all season long, and one thing that's really, really stood out to me is the fact that the cutting numbers look significantly different than they did a year ago. He's not cutting as often or effectively as he did with the Pacers. His field goal percentage has dropped from 77.1% on cuts with the Pacers in 2020-2021 to just 61.5% with the Spurs this season. And the other thing is his teammates connected on him about 2 times per game on cuts last year. This year, it's less than 1. So I just, you asked the question earlier, are they utilizing him correctly? Are they maximizing his talents? I don't think so. And I don't know why that is the case. Like, I understand that there's not as much shooting on the Spurs as there was on the Pacers last year. I understand that Jakob Poeltl kind of has to be stationed in the paint, so that clogs things sometimes. I understand DeJounte Murray wants to get to the paint or he wants to shoot a mid-range jumper, but it feels like you should be able to get this guy open with as well as he moves off ball, and the movement just hasn't been there. And I don't know if that's like a personnel thing like we're talking about now or if it's a Doug thing, but they got to figure that out because for this to work, he's got to move off ball. He's got to be an effective cutter.
Yeah, do you think that actually a move to the bench would actually work better within that? Like, because you mentioned how, like, obviously the cutting stuff, just personnel wise, right? DeJounte likes to get to the rim. Jakob has to stay pretty close. I don't think Jakob's gonna be shooting, pull up mid range jimmies anytime soon. Do you think potentially a move to the bench would actually work out better? Because I could see it. I definitely could see it. But even then, I still can't get over the fact of, like, you brought him in to start. If you end up benching him, just kind of psychologically, like, I don't know what that would do for him. I don't think he would, his confidence would be shaken or anything like that. But I think the overall fit, his play style, especially with the personnel the Spurs have, it might be better for a bench move. I would love to hear your opinion on that, though.
Yeah, it's strange because, like, I love Keldon Johnson, and yes, he is the second leading scorer on this team, and I think, he has some potential that he can become better than he is right now. Obviously, he's only like 22 years old. He's shown quite a bit, but he's also fairly limited. And thinking of the Spurs starting lineup, removing Doug McDermott from that, you lose a lot of spacing. Like, I understand that Keldon Johnson is also shooting about 41, 42% from 3, but the shot versatility is nowhere near what Doug McDermott provides. Doug can shoot coming off screens. He can run, around the court, relocate. He can shoot going left. He can shoot going right. He can shoot going into a shot. He can shoot falling away from the hoop. Like, he can also shoot when he's stationary. And you look at Keldon Johnson, and he is just a stationary shooter. So you remove Doug McDermott from the equation, the gravity that he has as a shooter, his ability to be pretty much anywhere, any scenario as a shooter. What does that do to San Antonio's offense? Like, they're going to have to replace that somewhere. I don't know that Doug, is going to be able to be replaced by a guy like Keldon. Like, respectfully, he hasn't shown any ability to shoot coming off screens. He's not shooting off movement. He doesn't shoot off the dribble. He had one the other night against the Hornets when Montrezl Harrell sagged off him and he was standing in the paint. And so, of course you're going to take that shot. But, man, I just don't know. It is a weird predicament to be in. I think he would be fine off the bench, but it worries me, what does it do to San Antonio offensively? But again, he's so bad defensively, maybe it offsets. So I don't know. It is a really weird predicament that they're in. I don't know how they handle it, but at the very least, as I mentioned earlier, consider moving on from him, and not cutting him, because obviously you owe him all that money, but consider trading him. I don't know, because I think you can upgrade there as well. And man, it is just a weird place to be in. You're a rebuilding team, whether fans want to admit that or not, and so you're going to have to make hard decisions. And thank God, a guy like Brian Wright is making them, and not me, because I don't even know where I would begin. Honestly, I don't know where I would begin.
Yeah, and I think last but not least, let's take a look at where the Spurs, sit in the play-in race, and if they can honestly sneak into the play-in tournament during the final leg of the regular season schedule. Noah, I didn't think we'd be here, brother. I'm not gonna lie to you, bro. I did not think after the trade deadline and everything like that, this would even be a discussion. But while we're diving into this topic, why don't we both answer the question as to whether or not the Silver and Black should strive to make the play-in? Noah, you're gonna go first, bro. Should the Spurs aim for the play-in for a second consecutive year?
Yeah, that's a tough one. If you're asking me, and I think you know where I stand, I think most Spurs fans probably know where I stand, I would say no. That's not to say that they should just, sit DeJounte and Jakob and bench everybody, and let's roll out Primo and Trey, and let's get Devontae Cacok and Joe Wieskamp minutes, and let's bring up DJ Stewart and Robert Woodard II. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying that they should tank. By all means, continue to try to win. That's how good organizations run a rebuild. They're trying to be constructive. They're trying to build something. They're not just trying to break everything down to get the number one guy. But if you're in a position where you could potentially have a really nice player in the draft on your hands, for example, Dan Weiss the other night on the Toronto Raptors broadcast said, everybody who has been in the 7th best lottery odds over the last 4 years has hopped into the top 4 of the lottery. The Spurs are 7th place right now there. They have the 7th best lottery odds. I'm not saying that it's going to happen. Eventually that streak has to end. But if you're in this position where you need an influx of talent, you need a 4, you need a 5. This draft is top heavy with 4s and 5s. I just don't understand why you wouldn't at least try to be, aiming for a better lottery pick while still trying to get your guys experience. So yes, give Josh Primo minutes. Let's see what he can do. Let Lonnie have some more opportunities on ball. Let's see what Keldon Johnson can do on ball, because that's going to be important to his development as a player. I understand what DeJounte can do with the ball in his hands. I know that he's touched the ball, more than 4 players in the entire NBA. I understand he can get you, 29 and 9 on a nightly basis. 29 and 9 from DeJounte with this supporting cast, it's got you barely in the play-in picture. So let's see what other guys can do while trying to build for the future and also aim for that lottery odds. To me, that's the best case scenario, is that you're losing close games, you're still trying to win, and you're getting experience for guys. Because if you're in the play-in, Dame, you're going to get the 12th, 13th, 14th, and if you make the playoffs and you get swept by, the Jazz or the Suns, then you're looking at the 16th, 17th, and 18th
Worst
pick.
case scenario.
And to me, you don't want to be there.
Yeah.
You don't want to be there.
Yeah, I think... I agree with everything you said. I think in terms of striving to make the play-in, no, I don't think that should be your priority right now. I definitely think it's getting everyone touches, everyone opportunities to kind of help better their, further their development. I don't think making a play-in, hoping you get number 10. I don't think the Lakers, even though the Lakers have been awful this year, I don't think they're going to lose the 9th seed. So you're going to get 10th, probably going to get slapped up really quick in the play-in game. And then you're picking, 9, 10? That's worst case scenario. I think the Spurs should definitely say if they make the play-in on top of their guys getting some good touches, some good reps, then yeah, cool. That you made the play-in. You're kind of doing a little bit of both right now, winning, getting some guys some important in-game reps, kind of the best of both worlds. But I don't think when I mean striving to make the play-in, I think that means not giving Keldon Johnson these specific opportunities, not letting Primo play, not letting Trey Jones play, not doing this. That's what I think of, right? And no, the Spurs shouldn't be doing that at all. And in terms of, striving and actually trying to, no, they're going to play the 19th. They have the 19th toughest schedule remaining right now. The Pelicans have the 26th, right? The Portland Trailblazers have basically the easiest schedule going forward, and they've looked awful. They've lost 6 in a row. The Pelicans have dropped 3 games in a row. Sacramento is 4-8 since the Sabonis trade. They're awful. Who knows what's going to happen? It's a real possibility. Even if me and you are saying, no, they shouldn't strive to do it, these other teams are so bad, and the Spurs schedule is easy enough that, it's definitely a possibility. I'm kind of leaning, 40-60 right now. Not 60-40, 40-60 that they'll actually make it. That's what
I'm going to go further. I'll take that further. I think it's a 70. I would go 70-30 that they make it.
Yeah.
I do not see them missing out. And that's kind of what it frustrates me a little bit, because it feels like the Spurs aren't really doing anything necessarily to constitute them winning, right? They are sort of still I think they've lost 4 of their last 5 games, so they shouldn't really be in a position to be in there. But like you mentioned, everybody else has been so bad. I mean, like you mentioned, the Sabonis trade has kind of blown up in Sacramento's face. They were saying, we're all in for the playoffs. We're getting Dante DiVincenzo. We're getting Sabonis. We're getting Holiday. We're also going out and we're grabbing Trey Lyles. This is our push. You're 4-8. You fall in 2 games below the Spurs in the standings. That's not good. And then Portland, we talked about this the other day. We texted back and forth. Portland has been so bad. And I think it's intentional. They started a lineup. Dame, they started Josh Hart, Brandon Williams, Elijah Hughes, CJ Ellaby, and former Spur Drew Eubanks. That, you're not trying to win. They lost by 38 in that game to the Jazz. There's just so many circumstances that it's pointing to the Spurs making it. And not last but not least here, and I know I'm sort of kind of going off the rails. I'm getting kind of caught up in my words, but could the universe want the Spurs to make the play-in more than CJ McCollum getting COVID-19, Zion Williamson's return being pushed back even further, and on top of all that, Brandon Ingram suffering a hamstring injury that's going to sideline him until late this month? Those are all the teams that they need to be beating to get in the play-in, and all those teams are falling apart as we speak.
Yeah. The crazy thing, too, is speaking about that Portland game, I literally texted you. I was like, hey, bro, I'm tired. Just got back from work, blah, blah, blah. Right? And then I turn on the TV, and I didn't even need melatonin because I just turned on that Portland and Jazz game, and I saw them starting Josh Hart and Drew Eubanks and down by 50 or whatever. And I was like, oh, yeah, no, it's time to go to bed. Yeah, no, I don't need to worry about it.
It's a wrap.
I don't know. And, yeah, it's honestly, it's a pretty strong possibility that the Spurs are going to make the play-in. And I'm happy for them that, I'm anticipating. I said 40-60, but I'm not going to lie. A piece of me just thinks it's going to happen. And I'm happy for them, right? Really, really cool. Good for them. But man, you talk about needing, some good draft odds and really needing guys that can, essentially make a difference for you. I think, man, landing in the top 4 would have been perfect for this team. It's still a possibility, right? Something could happen, and not injury, but the Spurs could fall off a little bit and lose some games, and who knows, right? They're still in the lottery or in the early lottery or whatever. But it just seems all the signs are pointing that they're going to make the play-in. Good for them. I'm happy for them, but at the same time, it just doesn't hit the same when you could have possibly had a shot at Chet or Paolo or Jabari Smith, man. So who knows, right? Who knows?
And I think the last thing that is honestly really driving me crazy right now, I'm not going to lie, I watch every Spurs game with bated breath, and then I'm watching all the other games around the league. My palms are sweaty. I'm like, oh my God, every single game has play-in, playoff, lottery implications. The Los Angeles Lakers, we saw them the other night, right? They played the Spurs. They were really bad. They didn't have LeBron. Russell Westbrook was god-awful. The rest of that team was barely holding it together. The Spurs missed, 16 of their 30 free throws or something like that. And of all those games, that was like the game that I was like, okay, like the Spurs didn't deserve to win that at all, and they still won. Like they still were able to come out and finish this game, even though they didn't make a single field goal in crunch time. It was all from the free throw line. After spending the entire game missing free throws, Jakob Poeltl comes to the rescue, goes a perfect 4 for 4 in the clutch at the free throw line. And on top of that, I went back the next day and I went, okay, let's look at the 2-minute report, because I just like to see what the refs missed. The refs missed 2 fouls on Malik Monk at the rim, shooting fouls, which, if they make those free throws, he gets to the free throw line, even if he only makes half of them, game over. It's game over for the Spurs at that point. So I just was like, man, it really feels like the universe is pining for the Spurs to get into the play-in. I don't know what it is, but the other thing that just is like, wow, I cannot believe this. Los Angeles has not won a road game since January 25th, Dame. 11 of their last 17 games are on the road. Like, they're not going to, I honestly think they may not be in the play-in. They may fall out. Like, the Spurs may, supplant them in the 10th seed or the 9th seed. Like, it makes me nervous. Like, I'm going to be happy if they make the play-in. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, that's good for them. They're going to make the play-in. They're going to be competitive, whatever. If they make the playoffs, good. Great experience for the young guys. But I think still, like, at the end of the day, for an organization that builds through the draft, I think you have to have at least, like, a little bit of self-awareness to realize that most of your guys you didn't draft them at, like, 30 or 28 or 29. Like, yes, you got DeJounte at 29. You got Tony at 28. You got Manu at 57. You got Kawhi at 15. But for every Kawhi and Manu and Tony and DeJounte, there's a guy like Corey Joseph who's just, he's just a role player. Kyle Anderson, who's just a role player. James Anderson, who's a bust. Olivia Jean-Charles, who never plays a minute in the NBA. So, like, do you want to hedge your bets on finding your guy, next to DeJounte, your secondary star or your third star next to DeJounte, with the 18th, the 20th, the 24th pick, whether that's your pick or the Raptors pick or the Celtics pick? Like, to me, good. You like Tari Eason? Great. I do too. Do you like Keegan Murray? Great. I do too. Are they probably going to become the next superstar that the Spurs need to get back to contention? No, probably not. The odds are no. So is it impossible? No, we've seen it before from the Spurs. They can make a little magic work, but man, like, hedging your bets on that's tough. I mean, it makes me a little bit worried for what they're going to do the rest of the season. I know we saw Joe Wieskamp and Devontae Cacok get converted from two-way contracts to full-way contracts, and so now it seems like, maybe they want to get them minutes. But, I mean, they haven't really played since then. The Spurs still have something to play with or to play for, and that's kind of what makes me nervous is this play-in tournament. It's great for competitive basketball if you want everybody competing for the playoffs, but, man, a few years ago, no play-in tournament, the Spurs might have packed it in.
Yeah.
At that point, they're not playing for anything. Like, they're not playing for anything. So, man, love the play-in tournament for what it brings in terms of bringing teams to the brink there, and they're really fighting to get in the playoffs and the tooth and nail, and there's no one really outright tanking except for maybe like 2 or 3 teams. But, man, like, I would be lying if I said I wouldn't have been okay with the Spurs at this point when the play-in tournament did not exist, just going, okay, let's see what we have in Josh Primo. Let's see what we have in Keldon. Let's get Lonnie reps. Let's get Joe reps. Let's get Devontae reps. And, let's put DeJounte and Keldon or, whoever on ice, because this season's a wrap. But there is no wrap. With the play-in tournament, there is no wrap. It's literally last day. You can fight till the last minute. So, man, I guess it is what it is.
Yeah, Brad. I'm not going to lie to you. If the Spurs take the Lakers play-in spot, oh my goodness. I'm going to be so excited to see all the takes flying everywhere about the Lakers missing the play. And I'm not even one of those Laker haters. Like, LeBron's my favorite, probably like my second or third favorite player of all time. But, like, oh my God. See, this isn't even a Lakers pod, so I can't even go into depth from what I've seen about that team. But just know, man, thank God we're not in a situation like the Lakers right now. I think every Spurs fan can just take a sigh of relief that the Spurs don't got those kind of issues right now, so that just does it for me, bro. I think that's a good note to end on.
Yeah, and I think that is probably a good note to end on. I just wanted to throw one last little tidbit in there. So I was on the Anthony Irwin show. He's a writer who writes about the Lakers for SB Nation, and he was talking about, like, what frustrated him most about the rebuilding years of the Lakers, right? And so we said one of the things that really, really frustrated him is when the Lakers were really, really bad, right? They're no chance of making the playoffs. But their coach kept doing this thing where, all right, we're a upstanding organization. We're going to do things the right way. So when it came down to crunch time, instead of playing guys like D'Angelo Russell, instead of playing guys like Jordan Clarkson, he said, yo, Ronnie Price, get out there. Like, respectfully, if the Spurs end up playing Josh Richardson a lot of minutes and Josh Primo doesn't get too many minutes here and there, or Lonnie doesn't get many minutes, I'm going to be a little disappointed because, fine, you want to make Josh Richardson a part of your future, go right ahead. But if you're not really convinced that he's going to be a part of this organization long term, and you're playing him at the expense of getting experience for Primo, for Lonnie, for Trey, man, what are you doing? Like, really, what are you doing? Because those are guys who are going to be here a long time. You don't know if Josh Richardson is going to be here for a long time. So, love Josh. I don't think, is it right to sit him at the end of the bench? Maybe yes, maybe no. But you're looking at what to do in a rebuild. I don't know if the right thing is giving a guy who's, 27, 28 years old, 20 plus minutes a night at the expense of younger guys when you're still rebuilding, when you're barely in the play-in race. So, man, I know I kind of rambled there. We've let our frustrations out. We've talked about it. We're going to be fine either way, or I'm going to convince myself I'm fine either way. But this about wraps things up. It does it for today. So, man, thank you so much for hopping on the pod with me. Why don't you go ahead and let everybody know where they can find your content, plug anything that you want, let Spurs fans know where to find you and follow you on social media. And, man, I'm discombobulated a little bit, but the floor is yours.
Yeah, everyone go follow me on Twitter at DA Bartonek. That's at DABARTONEK. No podcast next week. I'll be in New Orleans. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm on spring break. I'm only going for 2 days, but yeah, man, I'm going to have a good time. Maybe I'll see Zion out there and convince him to come to the Spurs. Who knows? And yeah, just, check out all my football stuff. I have a lot of football stuff coming out right now just because, the NFL draft's here. A lot of, Spurs stuff are pounding the rock, all that good stuff. So check out everyone. Holler at us, man. We do a lot of good stuff over there. So yeah, Noah, thanks for having me. And yeah, man, I enjoyed this one.
Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you to everybody who tuned into this edition of Alamo City Limits. And for those of you listening at home, again, don't forget to subscribe. Leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. We've got a fantastic staff of writers over at Pounding the Rock who do an amazing job of keeping everybody up to date with their favorite team. So check our stuff out. But until next time, Spurs fans, take care.